Hi, everyone, and welcome to Huddle in Place with the Nine-Sided Circle. I believe we are on episode 41 today, and it is May 7th, 2020. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Noor Kyle, and I'm in Los Angeles.
And I am the other one of your hosts, and I'm Mushtaq Ali in the Bay Area or Taos Pueblo.
In front of a lovely
Yes, an
Adobe
Adobe
house.
that I wish I was in right now, because those Adobes handle being in really hot climates much better than my little house here.
Yes, it is toasty here in California today.
Yeah, it's going to be 90 here today, so.
Oh my God, I think it's like 82 here, so I live near the ocean though. I'm sorry to hear it's going to be so hot there. So we wanted
to talk about today.
Yeah, what are we talking about today? So I got excited after I read an article today about medieval art during the Black Plague era in Italy. And as a result, what I wanted to talk about today is how art, expresses and reflects reality. And for us right now, we may be feeling, understandably, like we are alone in what we're feeling. Like this has never happened before. This is, as everyone keeps saying, an unprecedented time that is full of unique experiences. And on some level, all of that is absolutely true and valid. And yet, as we can witness through art, we can see that other people have experienced these same feelings and thoughts over centuries. People who have gone through the Black Plague, people who have gone through all kinds of
Cholera,
crises.
scarlet fever, tuberculosis. It wasn't that long ago. As a matter of fact, it was in my father's generation. My father died of tuberculosis. Nobody dies of tuberculosis anymore, but in my father's generation, tuberculosis was cancer.
Yeah.
It would just jump up and kill you, and they had, until they developed antibiotics, there was no real treatment other than go to the Southwest where it's dry.
Yeah.
And that was no joke. And it was a plague like we're experiencing now. People would get it through being coughed on or breathed on.
Yeah.
And that went on
forever.
Yeah,
like
for decades.
Forever.
Yeah. And there's no building an immunity to it because it's a bacteria.
Yeah. So what emerged for me through my article reading today, and I may link to a few articles in the comments today just so you guys can see that, rather the description, since we're talking about YouTube. And some of the things that we can witness through literature and visual art over the centuries are signs that people were craving for the mystical, craving normal and familiar stuff, intimate experiences of isolation or loneliness or both, as those are two different things, as a lot of us are discovering right now. Visceral fear or dread, terror even, emotional numbness. There's also this idea of a loss of time and sometimes a loss of a sense of self due to the disruption of our former routines and interactions with other people. And we also have a hyper-awareness of death's inevitability right now. A lot of us are experiencing that. And there's something healthy about mortality awareness. And we can find that goes in two different ways when we have a healthy relationship with death. Life is short. We should be more, responsible and attentive to our actions. Some people traditionally might use the word pious. That doesn't really work for us per se, but that was the way people thought about it. Likewise, we can think life is short. Let's party, let's dance. And all of these themes are reflected in lots of medieval art from around the time of the plague, the Black Plague of the, when is that? Like the 1300s?
Yeah,
like
the first time around. Yeah.
Yes. So during that time, what I read is that, just as things were getting into gear with the plague and everything, in Italy, there was this development of in our culture that was becoming more experimental, more adventurous. And then these artists who were leading those movements were killed by, ostensibly by plague. And their students kind of tapered off. And what we found in looking at art history is that art took a turn towards the more traditional religious icon themes. There was less adventurousness with materials and with scenes that were depicted. So images that were starting to become more three-dimensional and dynamic and full of expressive drama, they were heading more into like Byzantine style art with its 2D forms and not a lot of interaction with viewers. So this, in a sense, gives us the impression that people were looking to return to something familiar and expected. And over time, we can see a lot of expressions of what I've talked about in danse macabre genre art. That's where we have skeletons dancing. And this gets back into the awareness of mortality and all that. And Mushtaq, I know we talked about the, how do we say that? The
Decameron.
Yes,
The
so
Decameron.
this is, I have not personally read it, but from what I understand, this medieval novel from the mid-14th century is becoming really popular right now. The mid-1300s.
It's funny as hell.
Yeah.
I read it when I was like 16 because that was back when me and my friends, who were all total geeks, were reading things like the Decameron and Gargantua and Pantagruel and Naked Lunch and all of the really interesting literature.
Yeah. So what I read today is that people are holding like $150 5-week book club sessions on Zoom with like famous literary critics about this book. So
don't waste your money.
Yeah.
Get the book and read it.
Right, exactly. Yes. I mean, even if you can't go out.
Mushrooms help, by the way. I didn't say that. No, I didn't really.
But take advantage of access to books on Kindle or on, the Gutenberg Project where books are free. But anyway, we also have in more modern times, The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Edgar Allan Poe lost his beloved wife to tuberculosis.
Yeah.
That colored his writing from that day on.
Mm-hmm.
So read The Mask of the Red Death. It's actually, in a lot of ways, way more fun than the Decameron for what we're going through now.
Yeah.
And shorter.
So all of that stuff is what was on my mind today. And one also interesting to me, at least one tidbit I found that apparently with the 1919 Spanish flu pandemic, there aren't as much examples of art related to that experience because of the fact that the data around deaths and infections and all that stuff was basically not necessarily censored, but there wasn't a lot of that being put out there because people were really, governments were trying to keep morale higher. And what that means is people didn't have a real sense of the weight of that pandemic until after the fact.
Yep. But
so,
if you look at things from that time, my mother, there was a scarlet fever plague not too long after that, I think around 1920. And my mother caught that when she was a very young girl.
Yeah.
And that affected her, not physically. She was one of the lucky ones who didn't end up with heart diseases of one form or another. But in her writing and her art for the rest of her life, that was like a thing because she was at death's door for weeks.
Yeah. Yep.
Nowadays, we would say PTSD. but
Right.
back then they didn't have a word for it.
There is absolutely, an implied sense of PTSD in a lot of this art.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going forward, we do not necessarily know what to expect, but people are already producing art that reflects the experience of this moment for them.
And with whole new mediums, which is very
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have a lot more audiovisual artistic media come out of this. So that means film, plays, music, things like that. And it'll be interesting to see what emerges. I mean, is it going to be anything like with the Spanish flu pandemic, where because we didn't have a clear sense of exactly what was happening, we didn't have a lot of cohesiveness through that experience, is that going to be reflected in our experience here? I mean, in the US, we're having an issue with that, but perhaps not, who knows?
It's a very interesting thought. So our advice to you is do art.
Yeah, I mean, it is one way to kind of screen cap this moment, to use the lingo of our times, right? But that's going to be something that future generations are going to look at, and they will be able to connect with us and our experiences through the art that we produce, just as we're doing with the art of previous generations. So that's where I'm at today.
Yeah. So that's what we got. And
So,
we'll be back tomorrow
yes.
with more exciting and interesting and thought-provoking stuff.
God willing, yeah. All right. So take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.